Hi again guys, and welcome to another revisited car from the Gran Turismo franchise that we have already discussed, but for obvious reasons this one has been requested to take another look at, and in particular it's very easy to understand why that's the case if you've played Gran Turismo 6 at length, because this of course is a hugely popular car on there, a DLC car, one of the relatively few DLC cars on Gran Turismo 6, the Toyota TS030 Hybrid. Now, of course, this has been outweighed now, in effect, by the TS50, but it still has its fans. For obvious reasons, it's still an excellent car. It's among the best in the game for fuel economy on both GT Sport and GT6, especially with that hybrid system kicking in to help you out. But the reason why, of course, we are revisiting it, as we are with a lot of cars that were already featured and even already reviewed, is because, in particular, this car could not be upgraded. On Gran Turismo 6, you could make it heavier and you could reduce the power, but you couldn't make it better. Now that was kind of unfortunate, but at the same time it was made up for by the fact that unlike the Nissan GT-R Nismo LM car, this was a supremely competitive machine. Now personally I love the Nissan, but most people didn't get that much use out of it because of how radically different it is. You have to approach it in a totally different way, whereas the TS30, it's a pleasure to work with. It's so quick through corners, tons of grip, effortless power, and because of the fact that it has that hybrid system, it's actually putting out higher numbers, especially with regard to cornering speed, out of corners that is. It's a lot faster than its raw spec would suggest, so it can actually easily keep up with some other LMPs around technical circuits, which could have 200, 300, 400 horsepower more. And that did make it kind of OP, because the PP level for it was kind of low compared to many of the others. In fact, it was a lot lower. Now, that system is gone. Of course, it's just done in overall classes, such as this one, Group 1, or with the road cars, of course, based on power. So within the Group 1 category, this is one of the few occasions on Gran Turismo Sport where we are reviewing a car and the specs that I put in the description and that I'm talking about are not the stock numbers, because I used to always have the fully upgraded numbers, because the whole point of my reviews was for people to know what the potential of the car was without spending millions and millions of credits when you haven't got that kind of money to waste. That was the whole point of the review. Whereas on GT Sport, the point of the reviews is different, because now there's less of an inclination to fully upgrade a car, because you can't even use it like that most of the time anyway. Now with that being said, I am still reviewing this one in its fully upgraded form because of that change. You couldn't upgrade it at all, so what kind of a difference does that make to the car now, especially given how good it was, even without any upgrades. That was around 235 mph car with the right gearing. I did a tune setup for it way back on Gran Turismo 6. Deceptively quick. A deceptively quick car, definitely. Now, it's even better, because the tuned numbers on this car now are 641 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque, which again is a very deceptive number because of the hybrid system. It's actually a lot higher than that, and so is the power in reality, but only part of the time, of course. The weight as well can also be dropped much, much further. I mean, it couldn't be dropped at all before, so anything is further than that, down to 792 kilos, which is a really nice weight for this car to be working with, and it allows the horsepower per tonne to make a huge jump up to 809. Now, of course, the beauty of Gran Turismo Sport's system, it has its faults, but in some ways it's good, because that still allows it to just go ahead and race against other Group 1 cars, at least theoretically, of course, without balance of performance. So at the moment that's more so private lobbies rather than, of course, GT Sport mode. But with that being said, on Gran Turismo 6, for instance, if you could do those same upgrades, the PP level would have shot right up and it would have lost all of its advantage. So in a way, a car like this could potentially struggle against some other LMPs now because of the entire class system rather than having that PP advantage. But that doesn't happen too badly, not as badly as it easily could, given how much more powerful some of the others are, like the Peugeot or the Porsche 919 for instance, which doesn't sound extremely powerful, but again, because of how powerful the hybrid system is, it's actually a lot more powerful. So what about in terms of how it actually performs? Because one of the best things about the TS030 was always that you could take it much further and drive it much faster because it had less power and far less torque, and also part-time all-wheel drive in effect. So has that been negated by more power, more torque and less weight? Well, thankfully, no. It's still a superb car around the track, as you can see here at the Nordschleife 24-hour circuit. It's no problem. It flies through the corners. This is the first time I drove the car, if I recall correctly on the game, and immediately I just settled straight into how it drove, just like on Gran Turismo 6. It is actually one of the relatively few cars which still handles in a very similar way. And that isn't too surprising if you think about it, given that it was one of the later cars of the franchise. As I said earlier, it was a DLC update, so of course it was much newer by definition than many of the, for instance, PS2 ports, which were slightly updated, or the full premiums, of which there weren't that many, but still, there were some, and even then some of those were from Gran Turismo 5. So overall, the main improvement which this car has had thanks to that tuning is definitely top-end speed, because as I said earlier, it could do about 235 before, but the difference is now it can get there much quicker, because the problem which the TS030 would always run into, regardless of its opposition really, was that after the hybrid system kicks out, which is very quickly, it loses a lot of speed compared to many of its rivals, because many of the other LMPs have way more power. Even something like the GTR Nismo leaves it in the dust, and on Gran Turismo Sport, although that could still happen, especially against a fully upgraded Nismo, because that thing is a monster in a straight line, or an R18, the difference now is that effect is nowhere near as bad. Again, in lobbies which allow it, but again, balance of performance can actually help this car out in a way because of that levelling effect which it has across the board to give the cars more of an equal chance. Under those kind of circumstances, the TS030 works very well. It's a very adaptable car. It feels like, as far as LMPs go, it kind of takes everything in its stride, and although of course it didn't actually win the 24-hour race in real life, it's a fan favourite for good reason. It's got a ton of potential, a ton of use, and it's one of those cars which made a name for itself very quickly when it was added to Gran Turismo 6. We'd never had it there before, and yet in a very short time, tons of people loved the car and started using it all the time. Certainly more popular than the Nismo, and more popular than the Zytek LMP2 car as well. Again, not hard to see why, it's such a good car. So if you haven't moved over to GT Sport yet, and you do like this car on Gran Turismo 6, you won't be disappointed. This thing's got a ton of potential and it certainly delivers on it. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.